joining us on this Friday morning. I know you're all very busy and have things to do, but you probably find this topic as interesting as I do. So I am DeLea Becker, Beck-Reit Commercial. In addition to that, I own Beck-Reit & Sons. We do TxDot road and bridge repair. 25-year-old company, and one of the reasons why I care about construction quality so much is when people say, well, it doesn't always matter. I'm like, really? Do you care about the bridge you drive across? I assure you, you do. So by nature, I really care about construction quality. I own buildings, I care about construction quality. And I could talk for hours. But then I realized it'd be better to bring some experts up here that are much calmer about it and come from different perspectives, which is valuable because they even teach me. The thing I did want to say today is, there is no rhyme or reason to my networking, but I end up meeting some incredible people. So, all of these gentlemen I have met at random things. I wasn't there to get business. When we met, I didn't get business from them per se, but I get value from people I meet. And so, that is how this is formed. They come from different points of view: construction, engineering, architecture, insurance, the back end of what happens whenever you have bad construction. I'm going to let them take it from here. They can take questions like we did last time. We can let them rant and rave and educate us. It's really very casual. This isn't Biz Now or Reka where it's planned out. I am recording. I'm an amateur at this. It is so that I can go back, make a transcription, and share it with people that weren't here. I don't have 1 million followers, maybe someday. But this is really good information. If you don't know much about construction quality, architecture that leads into it, I hope you leave here knowing more than you did, and you care more after today. Guy, I'll let you lead us off.
All right, so use this.
Your
All
assistant
right.
is that.
Well, good morning. I'm Dudley. I'm with Manhard Consulting. We are a 51-year-old civil engineering firm based out of the Chicagoland area. We've got 7 offices here in Texas, Dallas, Houston, and Austin. We do land development, we do survey, we do landscape architecture, and owner's rep and construction management. And most of my adult life, I've either been in construction, the development.
Hello, Rommel Sulit. I'm a founding principal, COO, and director of modular architecture for Forgecraft Architecture and Design. We're entering in our 11th year as a company. I would say that our areas of focus are multifamily of all sorts, including affordable housing, permanent supportive housing, multifamily housing. Yes, we're crazy enough to do condos. And then also sort of like building science forward projects, passive home design, passive building design, advanced prefabrication, and modular architecture.
Collins Brunner, I'm the insurance, as I like to say. And I guess the developer construction expert. I've been in the business 20 plus years. I'm actually based out of Texarkana, but 3rd generation. So my father and I are down here every other week doing business. Our kind of claim to fame down here is the Lauren Hotel development. So we did the OSIP while it was being built. We did the builder's risk. We did the permanent insurance on it now. They're doing one in Turks and Caicos. So that's about a $150 million project. So we did the builder's risk on that. It's called something different, but we're basically doing the OSIP down there as well. So we're kind of international. Our other big claim to fame that people would know is we did Dillard's property insurance. So have a little Fortune 500 company, so I kind of know what's coming down the pipe. That renews in January, so I kind of know what's going to happen for the rest of the year. So that's kind of, we're property focused, try to add value, not just sell a basic, simple, we'll do a restaurant, but we'd much rather do a development and get into the contract and try to help you navigate some of the down the line issues.
Cool.
How's that?
Very good. Jeremy Smith, Citadel Development Services. DeLea, thank you very much. This is awesome. We are at the core, we're a general contractor based here in Austin. We do have pre-construction teams that basically do everything from site acquisition all the way through handing over the set of keys to the final product. And that final product can be restaurants, retail. We're getting into multifamily. We've got a condo project going on in South Austin that we're really excited about. We're about 25 employees, so we're relatively small, and we operate here just inside of Texas primarily. But yeah, really glad to be here and talk about construction and whatever else comes up. So
done it.
That was a good line. I did say that, but that's
10
not.
minutes
That's
ago.
not. I did say that. That's not right. It starts with the developer. I mean, the developer has the idea. There is a need. Now you've got developers that are doing it for fee. You've got developers that are doing single-family master plan communities. You have developers that are doing a single entity. But it all starts with the guys with the money. And at the end of the day, I think what you're talking about, DeLea, when we bring it up, the quality of construction, it depends, in my opinion, what your point of the development is. If you're looking from the P&L versus, hey, we just need to get this built, turned around, flipped, and sold, that is a different mindset than somebody who's working off the balance sheet. Hey, this is something we're going to hold forever. For example, you have an apartment. You don't want to put gas in apartments. Why? Natural gas. Oh, it costs a lot of money. Well, yeah, it's a lot easier, faster, cheaper to do electric. Like you can market, especially like multifamily, run it through it, or a single family development. Don't put natural gas in, it's cheaper. I don't care, I'm turning it around. It's cheaper, it helps more people, I can be finished with it. Or you do put natural gas in the building. It's gonna cost a ton more, you have a lot more piping, it's a lot more safety, it's a lot more coordination, the price point's gonna be higher. Well, is your end buyer gonna use that? We'll pay for it versus the other way around. To me, it boils down to where is the goal, what is the point of the development? Now, to make the joke, from the design side, and actually from the construction side, yes, it starts with the civil engineer. Like literally, we are setting the table of what's gonna happen. Like we're not the chef, we're not the guy back in the kitchen bringing it out, we are not the staff coming in and bring the food, we are just setting the table. All these other people make it look pretty. We just put it together, so that makes sense.
Makes sense.
I mean, to that too, a civil screws up, the roads are wrong, the utilities are wrong. I guess let me jump back real quick. Anybody, like, nobody hears from a civil engineer. You don't hear about a civil engineer until something goes wrong. And the only time you have, well, it's all the same. How hard could it be? Like these guys, like gravity goes downhill, you get the bad water out. I mean, how hard is this? Well, until you have a bad civil engineer, I get that's across the board. You have a bad, how hard is it? They just draw lines on pages and they talk to the city. I mean, okay. Oh, come on, it can't be that hard to build something. I'll just go down to Home Depot and get some guys. It can't be that big of a deal. Yeah, until you have a bad experience, you're like, oh, that's why you pay for quality. That's why you pay for experience. That's why you pay for that. So start at the beginning from the civil, everything else is built up. Architect?
Yeah, then architect. Goes to architect next.
So I think to your point about setting the table, I like to think about it as the sandbox we've all been playing in for decades. And we probably take for granted what we call best practices, which actually I put best in quotes because it's just conventional practice. I don't know anymore if it's best today in today's market. I always think of every project as comprised of this holy trinity of the developer, the designers, which includes civil architects, all the consultants, and then contractors. So at the highest level, there's the conceptual and fiduciary responsibility, which falls on the developer, and also the developer ultimately carries all the risk in the end on a project. So that's something that's what gives them the right to, let's say, affect all our work. At the other level are the design teams, where we're here to build the recipe and create. No one gets into this field without this kind of like expectation of some benefit, I feel. Who that benefits, that's kind of a question, but ultimately it should benefit the community and also benefit the folks that are building it in the first place, right? And then the third aspect of it is execution, which is, now it falls onto the contractor to take this plan that is reflective of the fiduciary responsibility of the developer, and then also intended to sort of coalesce all the things that are important for a project to exist, whether it's mandatory building code, life safety, all the aesthetic benefits of it, the ability to allow that project to enable the users to live, work, and play. All right, so that's how I think of every project. So to me, the question is, are our best practices still relevant today, given the events of the last 10 years.
All right, well, one time that. All right, then it gets to the GC.
The
So
GC.
He has no control over design, let's just pretend. And you get the plans and tell us what the GC does next.
Well, the GC gets to execute the vision of the design team, you know, and when I think about quality in construction, everybody's got a shitty contractor story. Everybody's, you know, got a story about a contractor that it didn't go so well. And when I think about that, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think we've been in the world, in our business anyway, and what I've been doing over the last 20 years has been repeat business. We get in with concepts that want to scale and build a lot. And so, you know, reputation, brand is very important. And for us to get involved with something that's not built correctly and have to go back and fix it, it just doesn't feel good, right? So we want to be able to get to the end of a project, and you know, the romantic side of it is we want the design team to be proud of what we built because we're on that team together. We want the owner or the developer to be proud. We don't want to circle back around and have to start dealing with a lot of issues and problems after the fact, which can come from cutting corners, trying to save money, you know, doing a lot of stuff that are going to create problems operationally or whatever with the building after the fact. You know, I don't like having those conversations. You know, a quick example is we do a lot of work for a coffee concept that's building a lot of stores. And admittedly, we agreed to cut a corner on their behalf at the end of a project to do a parking lot. Probably not the best way we should have done it, but it was in service of getting open quick. And a portion of the parking lot failed, and so we had to turn around and go back and fix it. So not only is it selfishly for our company, is it a branding issue? It's a financial issue, right? So now you can talk about it's definitely cheaper to do things right the first time than it is to have to turn around and fix it on the back end, right? And again, selfishly, we can make more money doing it right the first time, building it per the plans, honoring all that, than it is to try to cut a corner and then where we have to go back and fix something at the end where it gets to be, you know, exponentially more expensive to do that. And not only that, obviously we want to get to the end of the project and we want to move on to the next project and not have to keep going back and back and back and back. So, you know, again, we can definitely go down the rabbit hole of quality with a lot of other things, but I think that's the first two things that come to my mind when discussing quality in construction.
Yep. So on the property front, because I know everybody's facing higher premiums, I step back and just kind of tell you how we got here. So if you think back to 2008, 2009 financial crisis, 0% interest. So there's always capital. It's always looking for a home to make money. So a lot of that money went into reinsurance. And I'm going to step back real fast and say the one thing no one talks about is, so the travelers, the CNAs of the world, they all buy reinsurance. Lloyd's creates that market. Lloyd's is that market. And so that money ended up in reinsurance, 08, 09. If you think about it, we didn't have a single hurricane to hit the U.S. from about 2008 to 2018. There was nothing. So you had rates decreasing. And I should step back and say one other thing. The insurance market is always going through hard markets and soft markets. It's not perfect because there's actuarials and they're trying to predict what's going to happen. So it's already doing this. So we did this until 2018, and you had this money that wasn't used to A, having losses, and B, making easy money, and then C, once the losses started coming, they're like, this isn't as great as we thought. So that they started getting out. And then you started having some hurricanes, 18, 19, and you had COVID. So what's happened post-COVID is inflation. So you had actuarials predicting in 2020, we're going to have this amount of losses. We're going to have this amount of premiums, this kind of rate. So what's happened is the time to rebuild is exponentially longer and the cost to rebuild. And so you have a lot of underinsurance, so people aren't insuring what it should be insured for, and it's taking more to repair, and it's taking longer to repair. So that's why everybody's just getting beat over the head with it. And you've had people move to Texas, more tornadoes, more hail. We can argue about the cause of that. Some of that's just, people are going out west, people are going north. That's where the storms are. So more people are getting hit, and so each storm is being bigger and bigger. So that's why we're all feeling rate increases. So back to the construction, the better the construction, the cheaper the premium. And it's supply and demand. So the more supply there is in the market for your project, there's more demand, your rates are going to be less. And I can go into more details on that, but that's kind of like how we got to where we are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I can add, so this is where conventional practice becomes involved, right? You're presenting this very clear delineation that if you build into the construction on the front end, your premiums are going to be safer down the road. And yet, why do developers that I've worked with continue to sort of fall back on their own, let's say, preconceptions about building design? So I'll give you an example. There was a project that we're working on in Houston where, they wanted to do stucco on the building. And in our experience, I know this is this is kind of what started this whole thing, because the conversation that DeLea and I had at Knockout Night. They wanted to do stucco. In our experience, commercial grade stucco is a tough thing to get done right. So we prefer EIFS, right? Our envelope consultant has presented a lot of information where the insurance companies are actually seeing the benefits of EIFS more so than stucco. Part of the reason for that is that panel has built-in drainage layer. So flash forward to 2021, this project was designed under 2012 building code, 2021 building code. Now in that section that covers stucco and, let's say, fiber cement panels, now you're mandated to have a drainage layer in there. Our developer, we designed our project in anticipation of that. So all our designs, whether it was fiber cement or stucco or EIFS, had drainage layers showed. They value engineered it, right? Because of the perception of EIFS against stucco, and then also, it would have cost them $50,000, $60,000 to have a drainage layer in there. But again, in their calculus on the front end, they didn't want to spend that money because it was something that they, that to me, that's a fairly simple investment into the future of that project moving forward. And then some other things that happen on a lot of their builders risk collapse. And what just happened last week on this project that is incomplete? Hurricane Beryl hit Houston. So I'm very concerned about the status of that project today. So that's a great example about how building in the quality on the front end really matters.
Yeah, but I think that we all think we're nice, smart, intelligent, genius people. We only change because there's pain. And I think that, I made the joke when you come up, like once you have a bad contractor, once you have a bad engineer, once you have a bad architect, God forbid, once you have bad insurance, next time that happens, you're like, no, I'm going to pay more for that. Because it is it's cheaper up front. It's more expensive up front, but I'm better down the end. And I think that's a great example. I promise you, I don't have a...
No, you're right. In principle, you're right.
The developer you're talking about will put EIFS or something else in place. Because next time you're like, oh, that was the value of what I paid for up front. And so I think that's just the cycle. There will always be designers, insurance, and contractors that will be cheaper than the four of us, without a doubt. And if you as a developer or you as a client wants to come up and we do our pitch, we talk about what it is, until you feel that pain, you're not going to make that choice. You're like, well, yeah, we were just talking about geotech. All right, well, geotech's geotech. You just put the holes in the ground. Like, how hard is this going to be? Like, why do I pay difference? Until you have somebody with a geotech report that came up that just cost you 10x because your foundations for your building were wrong. Oh, I'm going to pay for a better geotech. All of it is just, I think, pain-driven, and we all learn. They talk about multiple redoing your work. Yeah, you can redo your work. You can do it over and over and over again, but there's a point you're like, you know what, I'm sorry, we're going to open up. I know we're supposed to open up on Thursday. We're going to open up in 2 Thursdays just so we can get this done. I know you've got 2 weeks worth of revenue, but we are going to interrupt your clients coming into your, whatever that business was. I'm sorry, but if we do that during it, it's harder to get people in and out. So pain is the only thing that makes people change, in my opinion.
Okay, I've got a question for all of y'all. Pick 2 things that, your top 2 things that you can consider quality in what you do, in design, in construction, and insurance? That you look at it and you're like, these are the things I care about the most. I care about roofs, and I care about the envelope, always. I probably care less about how much parking spaces I got. Haven't had that pain. So, from your perspective, like the top two things, you're like, this is non-negotiable, this is important.
Well, from a construction standpoint, we're doing a condo project in South Austin right now, and it's waterproofing. I mean, it's probably the number one conversation. And again, that's not only from a building performance standpoint, but it's from a liability standpoint, 5 years from now. And so, when we took on the project, we insisted there was a waterproofing consultant on board. We're going to have them very involved in the project to make sure that they give us recommendations. We are going to execute 100% of those recommendations, and they're going to come back and review that and kind of give us a letter of concurrence, after that, so that not only do we know that we did it right, and we've got other eyes looking at it, but also to protect everybody and developer down the line. Number two, I mean, we like to be involved as much as we can on the design side, because at times I think there is a valuable contractor, opinion, if you want to say that, on certain things, because we have to build it. And so we like to be able to look at different systems, structural stuff, knowing that we're going to have to execute on that down the line. The things we look at are what could potentially harm the project after we're done. Waterproofing being one, acoustical is another one that a lot of people maybe don't talk about, especially on a condo project. Are the party walls or the demising walls going to be built correctly so that, if one family has a son that has a drum set, the family on the other side of that has a newborn is not, staying up late because they can hear all the, but yeah.
I completely agree with that. So yeah, architects and contractors can't get on the same page. I joke around, I say all the time, you want to keep your multifamily tenants happy, keep the water out and keep the sound down.
Yeah.
I think it's something like 40% of claims are related to envelope infiltration. 20% of that is your roof area. And so fortunately there's solutions for all that, right? I would say that we have to build in our best practices as a design team. We have to put that in our recipes and our formulas when we produce our construction documents. If the owner chooses to deviate from it, or if the contractor chooses to deviate from it, you at least have an approved set of plans that you can refer to. I hate to say, like, it's crazy that we could talk anecdotally about all these problems that we've had on previous jobs. Yeah. This project that Guy and I worked on, they had some condensation issues, and they called me back onto the site, and the solution cost them like, I don't know, $250,000 or something like crazy like that. The benefit of it, so for us, like the easy thing for us was like, okay, well, what's the solution? Well, follow the plans. Follow the plans that we produced for you in the first place. So I build them to reproduce the same exact plans and told them to follow the plans. And our envelope consultant complied with that, and we got it fixed. But when people deviate from a set of documents that have already gone through the ringer on mandatory building code, have already been reviewed by the insurance companies that should be reviewing all these as they go, when you deviate from it, sometimes that's often not tracked well in a given project. It's presented as a change order or something like that. There's some positive financial benefit to it, but what often isn't tracked is the risk that decision saddles the project with for the life of the project. You only know when things go, as you said, when you start feeling the pain. So our solution is we baked into our plans the highest level. We say in our office the code compliant buildings are the worst legal buildings that you can produce, right? So we always want to be above that, and we want to record that in the plans.
Yes. Okay. Yep.
So I'm not sure there's actually like two specific things I would say. For one, just kind of like a background on insurance, like pick a guy you like and trust and run with that person. Most of us have the same markets. And they don't necessarily have the expertise, but they can get the market and push it out to you. We're more willing to look at contracts, give you advice on that kind of front. Look at, like, can stuff be taken out of? So I'm here to help you, not here to, like, charge you large amounts of money on your premium just because I want to. I want you as a long-term client and want to get them involved early. And the other piece, pick a GC that can actually do the work, that has the financials to do it. So had a project, and this kind of leads to my next point, was we would encourage the owner to normally control the builder's risk and the OSIP or RAP or CCIP. I mean, the bigger it gets, I would definitely tell you to look at a CCIP or a RAP policy.
Explain this to us, because
okay.
you explained it to me, and I was like, okay, well, now I'll do that forever.
So it starts to make sense about 20 million and up on values. An OSIP is an owner-controlled insurance policy, and just think of it as it basically wraps the project, and it is the insurance for that project while it's being built, plus out to the statute of repose for any construction defect claims. And so OSIP is owner-controlled and CCIP is contractor-controlled. Both are of value, both work. We would say owner because if you get in a fight with the GC and he walks off the job or goes financially bankrupt, you're out because you cannot go replace that guy midterm. And that kind of leads me to the next point of, be realistic on the duration of the project, because like on a builder's risk, that insurance company, that underwriter is building out their premiums based on how long it's going to take to build that project. So they're projecting, 90% of it to be complete for 2 months. So then when you extend that for 6 months or a year, they're on the hook, and you're on the hook for paying whatever they're going to pay, because they cannot be replaced, because no one wants a half-built building just sitting there. So they're going to hurt you on that premium. Where if you were just up front and said, it's going to take, let's give 2 or 3 months of leeway, you're really going to help control your cost on the back end. And then back to construction, the better the construction, the cheaper it's going to be. So it's hard for the insurance to just give you, to try to eliminate some of the variables. So I ran some rates. So like the Lauren was one company, 77 million in values, and they're charged a 10-cent rate for the project. So we've done some large $50 million frame 5-story construction. That takes 3 or 4 insurance companies. That takes financing if you don't pay in full up front, and you're looking at 70, 80 cent rates. So it adds up fast. So theirs was 200,000 in premium, and project about half the size is about $1 million in premium. So
because of construction material.
Purely because of construction material. So frame construction, if it catches on fire, it's going to burn. There's Dalrock. There's that big frame. It's about $1 billion building or project that was being built, and it burned for 24 hours. My guess is they're going to tear it all down and have to restart. And then kind of like any frame construction coming up after that's going to get a little rate increase because that project burned down.
Any owner, developer coming into it, they look, like Rommel brought it up, they are ultimately responsible. Honestly, at the end of the day, they can fight and the legal system can protect them. Not what any of us do. They are on the hook. At the end, they're the guys that are responsible for everything. So looking at what you're talking about, the better the construction, the cheaper it is for insurance. The better the construction, the better the plans, the clearer the plans, and you find a contractor that follows the plans, it will go faster because everybody's in alignment. So I think the number one thing for me is just working together with a team that's going to be able to go through problems quickly. Problems are going to happen on projects. It doesn't matter if you're remodeling your bathroom or you're putting in a 75-story tower on Rainy Street. Problems are going to happen. And if the team that get together, the team that is put together to handle that is the number one thing. Now, to be Dork civil engineer, number one thing I work for is water. It's our job as a civil engineer to get water onto the site and off the site, where it's supposed to be. Now, I think specifically one of the things that happens a lot of times with civil engineers, we'll work with the designer, we'll do our work, we'll go put our site development plan in, and while the city's working out, we're doing our next one. They haven't even started a lot of the architecture work. So once an architect comes on board, they'll start looking at some things and they'll call us. Like, hey, how about this? Hold on, I need to go review. I've slept 18 months since then. So once we come in, and there's a lot of times where what we put our finished floor at and what the architect puts their finished floor at is different. You know what that means? water usually comes into the building. So that is, I guess, minutia, one of the big things we look at as well.
That was huge.
Well, yeah, again, why do I look at that now? Because it happened. So I know to look for it. So,
Where did that happen? I mean, not the project, but you put the finished floor at this, the architect just got it wrong?
well, they could change, a lot of times, and again, I'm not bagging on the architect next to me.
I know.
I'll bag on lots of other architects.
Not this
It
argument.
was not that, it was another.
Yeah, we did podium. He was way up there. We couldn't get one. No, a lot of it is just, okay, hey, we need this. Well, all right, well, if we're gonna change this, or we need to put this, or we need some more parking in here, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll just do this, and they change the grades. A lot of times, we'll have clients like, well, we just moved the building 5 feet. Why is that costing me a lot of money as a change order? I was like, are you kidding me? We're rerouting all of the water around the site. Again, you don't know that until you do it. So, in this specific case, what I was talking about, we set the finished floor, the architect came in, took it, and literally just moved it 6 inches. In the big scheme of things, on acres of sites, an acres size-wise of site, 6 inches, how much is that? Except where this happened to be was right where a driveway was coming down, which was a whole bunch of water was supposed to come right in there, went right into the building. And, I mean, maybe this is on us too, we didn't check that. We're like, oh, we gave you the finished floor, why would we check that? Now we check that.
You trusted that the architect followed your plans?
Well, again, it's not just the architect, it's the team.
Okay.
So, the problem, we ended up fixing it, not a problem, it's all done, now it's part of our list.
Can I elaborate on that? So I realize that I probably only offered one of the two, which is, make sure that your plans are properly appointed, covering, focusing on an envelope, and access is another part of it. I think the second thing, to your point, is focusing on those transitional areas where there's shared coordination between where the scopes come together, and it becomes a really interesting thing because, civil, for example, they're responsible for grading, general grading, and then we can get into micro grading and that kind of thing. But at some point, where does that interface become really relevant with respect to the building? And that it happens at all the thresholds. And it's different. And so I learned in Houston, which is like flood prone and everything, that there's a requirement in Houston for all the thresholds to be flush with whatever your exterior grade is, which is counter to how we've always done it around here. We always want to observe kind of the accessibility criteria, right? Which is like I can't have more than ½ an inch level change, right, at accessible entrances and things like that. So understanding whose scope is which and make sure that's coordinated is done. We've had multiple projects where the accessible routes, we're responsible for the accessible routes within the building, but ultimately the question is who's responsible for the accessible routes outside of the building, right? That's shared scope, right? Things like retaining walls. It took me 10 years to figure out that civil engineers don't do retaining walls. That's a structural requirement, and if I have to hire Manhard to do my retaining walls, I have to hire a structural consultant to do the retaining walls. So, and then also MEP, like typically what all the MEP work extends out to 5 feet outside the footprint of your building, and then civil has to pick up from there. So those little transitional areas, which ultimately is going to cost you a lot of money to fill in those gaps. Yeah. And if it's not reflected in the drawings, then who's got it, right? So
I think that brings up a good point across the board of finding a good contractor. We make the plans, we have the construction manual to build the building. They have to build it. They have to fix everything we do wrong. I'll do it code, we may do right, there may be places where we put together, the contractor has to fix this. And so hopefully you have a good team together that puts this in, a good contractor will come up weeks, if not months ahead and say, hey guy, you see this? How do we build this? You're like, sorry, this is what we're gonna do. And even if it's the point like, talking about the ADA change, ADA is a civil engineer's nightmare. How we have the grades, the slopes, sidewalks, crossing streets, trying to find ways to make water work plus make the accessibility. And you know who fixes a lot of that? The contractor. We're like, I have this drawn, and we come out there and like, I don't know how we're gonna fix this. So we talk to the team. But at the end of the day, those are the guys that have to fix it. So that's part of the team.
Open it up for questions. If you have no questions, we're going to let them talk for 10 minutes. Anybody have a question? Oh, goody.
Let's talk about IBC 17, special inspections. Like, there's supposed to be a checks and balances system here, and I think it's often overlooked, the importance of it, and the execution of it is often overlooked. So, you know, everybody defers back to the city building inspectors, but do they actually have the true education that they need to be doing these inspections? And the fact that IBC says they're held harmless, they're not liable and held harmless of any kind of oversight on their part. So we really need to be going to the third-party inspectors to make sure that these are being done, executed.
The question is about IBC Section 17, which defines the requirements for special inspections on a project, which often are going to be conducted by either the local jurisdiction or third-party reviewer. I would say most of the special inspections, and it differs by jurisdiction, right? So that section is meant to be exhaustive of all the potential special inspections that could occur on a project. In the city of Austin, for example, I think a lot of that flows through our structural team. So usually the requirements for special inspections are defined in their general notes in their structural plans. And then there's other things that are kind of related to that, deferred submittals. Anything that is submitted to the city for permit oversight and mandatory building code, that is not part of our sealed set of plans, right? So, you know, if you go to the city of Austin, most jurisdictions, there's a checklist of deferred submittals that you have to record. That way, everyone's on the ready to observe those, sign off on them. For a lot of structural special inspections, a letter of concurrence is sufficient. But then there's those other things. If there's any kind of like specialty construction, that kind of thing, yes, I agree. Third-party reviewers have to be in tow. Now, ultimately, I will say that responsibility falls on the owner, the developer, right? Those folks typically contracted them. And then if you have a development team that isn't, like, say, schooled in these processes, then you can often find gaps down the road in that regard. We have to make sure that the development teams understand where there's gaps that we're unable to fill. Sometimes we have to step in and fill in those gaps for them. Things like easements, right? Easements, dedication of easements, that falls on the owner's responsibility. But a lot of owners don't know that. I don't know how many projects I've had where there's still a blanket easement on the project that dates back 10, 15 years, and it was never dedicated, it was never signed off on. And so there's no as-built, and then, you know, sort of like plans to define, like there's a duck bank, you know, 5 feet outside of your building on the front end, and then, you know, guys like Jeremy have to discover it and then deliver the bad news that we got to move our building, you know, 5 feet over. So those kind of things ultimately fall on the owner's responsibility. We can certainly help them figure out where those gaps are. But yeah, that's a good point. That's a really important aspect of the project that could cost you down the road because you didn't have somebody lined up for it. Commissioning is another thing.
I'll add to that though, and gently disagree that I think it's more on the contractor side a little bit because you know we're ultimately responsible for calling and getting a lot of those inspections, and so you know so today we've got I think 15 different active projects in 15 different jurisdictions. And like Rommel said, every jurisdiction is a little bit different with what they require for inspections. So, you know, we ask a lot of questions. It's not always clear. Sometimes it gets a little murky. We have to ask a lot of questions. And, you know, our guys at the superintendent level have a checklist in the job site trailer of every inspection that's going to be required. And we don't just do that one time. We check back because it's, again, sometimes, you know, especially we got green energy, building stuff, third-party special inspections, the actual city inspections. So there's multiple layers, and I you know, again, I respectfully, you know, push back on that because we take ownership of that because we're on the front lines of making sure that a lot of those inspections happen or get called in a timely manner, and then we have to work again with the engineers for letters of concurrence and deferred submittals and all that. So yeah, it can get daunting sometimes. The only way we know to combat that is just keep a lot of pressure and ask a lot of questions. Call the city, you know, collaborate with the design team. Hey, is there any other inspections that you guys know we need to get? You know, it's a lot.
And sometimes the cities don't know. We have departments, you know, there's been a lot of turnover at every jurisdiction, at the highest levels, and a lot of departments don't actually talk to each other. So it's sort of like, in Houston, for example, if someone in planning wants to know what we're doing, wants to know what we've submitted based on some kind of traffic need, I actually have to submit the drawings to it's not like there isn't a single repository where everyone can go to and say, oh, well, here's an interesting recent change. I have to basically be proactive and train up everybody on that end. And every jurisdiction is different. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah.
So, he and I was talking on Wednesday about the difference between building to flip it quickly, as you mentioned earlier, and one that is built that you own and sustain and are actually building high quality about. Are you guys in positions to turn down the ones that are quick flips, or do you guys just not talk about those and still do them?
It depends on the client. So to the point, I can't obviously speak about them, but Manhard's in a position to turn down a client. But just because it's a quick flip doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You can be somebody looking to do this and do this right and do it quickly. I mean, one of the things I think that Jeremy talked about, I don't know this, but I'm going to assume, he talked about a lot of times doing repeat business. I'll bet you, especially I think you said it was coffee, that's probably a quick turnaround. But since they do it over and over and over and over, they know what they're doing. I assume they know what they're doing, and that team does it better. I think it's more of a mindset, because it's back to, let's say you're a quick flip for you want to do an apartment complex or a duplex or a house. I mean, you think about flipping a house. Is this a place you're gonna live? Is this a place you want your kids to live, your mom to live? All right, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But if you're like, no, I don't want my family in there, then I wouldn't want to.
I would just say, we don't do really any small residential projects that would be a flip. The closest thing I would say that we do is we work for a few build-to-suit developers that on these coffee shops, they'll build the project specifically to sell it to an investment group. And so their involvement is very short-term with the project. But again, with the bigger concept is still a pretty small world. So if we were to build something very cheaply, quick, inexpensively, cut corners so that the developer benefits from his sale maybe a little bit, it's still in a broader community that if something happens 6 months, a year down the line, they're going to know that Citadel built that and it was, had major problems. So we think about that. And again, not to mention it's, we've got warranties that we provide and an obligation well after the certificate of occupancy. And it just doesn't make good business sense to have to keep going back and fixing things. And we have enough of that as it is. We don't want to create those problems ourselves.
I would say most of the multifamily buildings I've worked on have been flips, right? A condo is a flip, right? Because you're going to turn over an HOA at some point, and then all hell breaks loose. But basically, the what's evolved for me is that most of the developers I've worked with, they're creating a product, right, that has value, and then they're gonna sell it to a property management company or somebody who's going to hold it in perpetuity. It really wasn't until we started doing a lot of affordable housing where our developers are going to hold it and maintain it in perpetuity. Every housing project in affordable housing has to be, it's like for the next 100 years or something like that. You can't flip that. So what does that mean in terms of how I approach my work? What it's evolved for us is like there's a professional standard of care, and at my company it's here, right? And if you're going to choose to work with that standard of care with Forgecraft, that's what you're in line for. We're not going to, that project that I mentioned in Houston, the owner tried to get us to change our drawings to remove those drainage layers and stuff. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to deviate from what I know is going to be a code compliant thing.
Your names are on the plans.
And my names are on the plans, my seals are on the plans. And when you get into a bind, I want to make sure that you can refer to those drawings and say, all right, here's the solution. We've had it all the time. It's my ruby red slippers, and it protects me for sure. You're the only, you don't have to pay attention to any of our plans. You can do whatever the heck you want, really. But, there's a risk involved in doing that.
So I'll say for the most part, like if it's a quick flip, the developer is not going to buy an OSIP. We'll try to educate them on the front end. Here's the advantages. So a good example is it's a local building it's a multifamily apartment. It's just been finished. Pitched to them OSIPs. You need an OSIP. strongly encourage OSIP. No, we're cutthroat. We want to do it cheap. So y'all might be able to guess what happened. But so there's a plumber that's had 2 separate claims. One, we'll call it 6 months ago, one 3 months ago. So they've now learned, well, now we're having to go through the subs insurance and the GC's insurance. And since there's been 2 claims that are multi-million dollars, there's a good chance that that sub is out of their insurance. They've exhausted all their limits. So then it's the GC's problem. And then, if that plumber goes to another project, does the work, has another claim over there, you would never know it, but his insurance has probably already been exhausted from those other 2 claims. And you don't know, like on an OSIP, it covers you out to the statute of repose, which is 10 years in Texas, and class action lawsuits on a condo deal. So that's why an OSIP is so important. So the OSIP protects you from that stuff. So the next time around, he'll probably be like, well, maybe it's not that bad of an idea. There's an upfront cost versus like we were talking earlier. The GC is going to charge you, their 10% insurance fee, or the OSIP's going to be paid up front, but it's sure going to pay you off on the back end, and more than likely that company will buy it going forward.
Well, a lot of times the cost of the OSIP too is not 100% on, well, you're not paying both 100% of the insurance policies for both. Because I know on ours, our policy premium goes way down if there's an OSIP on the project, right?
Yep.
So you're not doubling up.
Yeah, it's normally excluded. So the OSIP is the deal. You'll normally pay work comp. If it's a $100 million project, you can get work comp, but it's generally just a general liability for an OSIP. And like I said, if it's a long-term hold, you can look at any condo. You can look at the condo right down the street that's going through. All you got to just look at the outside and see the metal not looking as well as it could. I mean, that's coming up. The ACs weren't done correctly, so that's an issue. There is an OSIP on that deal, and you try to avoid it because it's hard to flip them. Those condo owners can't buy and sell, but I mean, there's some value in it, and you don't know it until something goes wrong. The one other thing I'll tell you on the builder's risk side, so there's kind of 3 parts. So there's the hard cost, so that's what it costs to build it. The soft cost, so if something does happen, the extra expense of rebuilding it, so like the insurance, you're gonna have to pay an architect, civil's gonna have to do the ADA compliance all over again, and then loss of rents or like loss of sales on the back end. So that's where you can really, and the loss of sales is the highest rated, because if you got a fire, you can't sell it later on, so you'll see a lot of cutting costs. We just want that number here. I'll write it for you, but I'm definitely going to say a disclaimer that this was your limit that you chose to do, if that makes sense. So work with them, but I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to protect myself. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm only wrapping this up because it's 11 a.m. So anybody that needs to leave, I know Guy does. You can run out. I don't know if everybody else needs to run out. I will be here for another hour, so if you want to stay and chat. I will get contact information. They're all on LinkedIn. I linked them in the post, so reach out to them. Clearly, I give them a stamp of approval if you're looking for something like this, and they're a wealth of knowledge because they spent hours with me talking.
Can I make a marketing pitch?
You can, but
So,
then everybody gets to.
Yeah, if anyone
So
wants
make it
to.
fast.
I just conducted a podcast with my colleague Chris Krager at KRDB that was monitored by Christoph Irwin with Positive Energy. He's part of the building science community. They're like the nuclear physicists of the MEP community, I would say. And he interviewed us, talked about modular architecture and advanced building sciences. So it's a 2-part podcast that just dropped this past week. And if anyone's interested in it, please reach out to me. I'll forward it to you. I might just even post it on my LinkedIn. And we get into the weeds on that thing. It's a different sausage we're talking about there. Yeah, trying to make.
I will post it on LinkedIn also. So yes.